Hey people, I'm CJ Miller. I'm in Shreveport, Louisiana. Come check us out. And yeah, so I'd like to talk to you a little bit. Just some things I have in mind. It's mostly about the way people treat each other uh, and the ways that we react to each other personally and the way that we react to each other uh, by policy. Policy, by the way, determines our laws. Like whenever we have disagreements in our personal lives and we can't settle it, then we got to go to society. Uh, that's the courts and let them work it out or whatever. Uh, and some of that is uh, predicated by laws beforehand, before there's a dispute, to say, hey, this is the code of conduct by which we agree to live if we're going to be in this society. Now, I don't really get into politics on my channel. I also really don't get into a lot of personal stuff. I don't get into sex. I don't get into sex talks. I don't get into religion. You know, I'll talk about those things, yeah, as applicable, and I'll talk about especially religion. Not really, because I'm not. I don't follow a specific religion, I do believe in God, and I do believe in a spiritual uh, connection, and I do believe in spiritual causality. So, in that time, and in that way, I'll address it and talk about it. So, what I want to talk about, the moment that's striking to me right now is Moses coming down from the Mount Zion. I think, yeah, that's right. Yeah, coming down from Mount Zion with the tablets of sapphire, and he sees the Hebrew people have forged metals and gems into a golden calf to worship. Um, Now, in the Ten Commandments movie, that was to impress upon the Egyptians that we have made this idol that we're going to worship. So, to make a show to you that we have turned our back on the God of Abraham and that we are willing to be polytheistic and so, yeah, we should come back to you, Egypt, and you can take care of us again, and we can be your servants as we were, and no fear of the God who brought out the plagues or whatever. But anyway, now this is what the movie The Ten Commandments. That Charlton Heston watch it every Easter, whatever. So, and I don't necessarily know how that's at the top of my head. I would have to read it. How is that described? That scene in the Old Testament? Uh, was it purposed, or had they really just, is it more like, hey, if we create this golden calf and we imbue into it energy, it will deify and it will be able to, you know what I mean? A sort of sympathetic magic, which is what the old Wiccan would do, the old Nimrod, the hunter. The Green Man, that the guy who puts uh, um, the animal skin with the horns on his head to move closer to the herd, to look part of the herd because of that's sort of a sympathetic magic, and is that what uh, uh, this grand gesture of building a golden calf. Is it kind of like that? So we're going to pray to it, put energy into it, and it's going to turn into a deity. Uh, or were they worshiping some? Is it? I don't know. Did they know that they were either creating a new deity, or did they know that they were uh, praying to a false deity, or were they praying to a deity of their past that maybe they hadn't quite let go of yet? I don't know. I don't know I don't know how that scene reads in that Old Testament, Exodus going into Leviticus, but I do Exodus going into Leviticus. But I do know that scripturally Moses sees this, and in his shock uh, and enragement, smashes the tabloid. the sapphire tabloid, from which God Himself, the finger of God, had inscribed upon it. So that's evidence, physical evidence. And instead of having that, and apparently you could drop something like that and it would shatter to dust because you couldn't even hold the pieces next to each other to say, "Hey, this is what it looks like." So this is, the something that's been carved by the finger of God that would have really would have been great to the world as some physical evidence. The answer of faith right here. Faith not needed because we have solidified proof, but instead it's smashed. So, and was that because Moses was in shock? Or maybe in this story, there could be another motive. It could be that maybe the message by the finger of God was less instructional and more inspirational. Maybe it was more like, "Hello, people, I love you. How are you doing?" It's very cheerful and everything like that. And maybe it wasn't motivational in the sense of fear that was going to inspire these people, fear of the rage of God. Hey, you know what he did to the Egyptians? Now this is what he's going to do to you. And he gives us these commandments. And if we don't follow them, this is what's to happen. And why? He sees people, this uh, golden jeweled calf and apparently some sort of, you know, orgy in ceremony to it or something like that, debauchery and everything going on, whatever, I don't know. And oh my god, we can't have that, so I don't know, apparently people were just freaking savages. I don't know. I don't think we're far removed from that sometimes. Anyway, the savage nature of people today, we just do it in nicer quarters. I have to look at my time up here. Yeah, I have to be careful as I talk about these things because my videos I tend to run long, and then it's like, oh my god, videos cut me off, and now I gotta I either get to do a part two of the video, or I either get to stop and redo the video and encapsulate it. My point is, ultimately, is that the way that we treat each other in society today largely is guided uh, in reference to whether it's part of our specific law or not. It is guided by ideology of spiritual nature of our religion. Collectively, what we think of as our religion and how what's right or wrong or whatever. Even though one specific religion cannot be used to dictate, especially in the United States, uh, what the law is, it still guides the individual vote. Here's where the politics parts come in. As you're considering your vote, and if you're looking back into Scripture as an example of what God wanted, we don't necessarily know. We don't know what was inscribed. If we're to believe Old Testament law, we do not know what was inscribed. Everything that came after that can be exemplified in the fact that, yes, a man who we're putting our faith in to communicate with God from Mount Zion for us, he has no problem. I guess for whatever reason, he has no problem uh, destroying an artifact of a certain artifact that would support our faith and say, "Oops, I smashed it," in his anger and his own humanity, and then going to scribe something on a tablet and this and that, and then there's a whole you get to the promised land. I think it was Canaan, and there's Canaanites and everything like that. I think that's what it was, and it was populated by giants. What the Hebrew people perceived as giants, probably just another race of man that had genetic traits that typically were a little bit bigger. That happens. As people evolve, and especially as the races were a little bit more, but they were um, less mingled than say today. It's not that big of a deal interracial uh, stuff is not that big of a deal. Back then, it really would have been. So, uh, according to, like just history, I mean, yeah, like, uh, yeah. Anyway, so what happened was we go to the giants, and they're genetically bigger. Probably not probably not like a whole different species. Probably still humans. They're just bigger, And anyway, not unlike, say, the sons of Abraham. One was meek and mild, and one was big, and one was a worker. So one was kind of a homesteader. He was a great cook, and the brother came home. And this is like Abraham was about to pass on, but he had told his brother, "Hey, you're tired, and you're hungry," and his brother was like, "Yeah, make me one of those great dinners." And so the dude was like, "Okay, well, I'll make you one. I'll make you the most awesome dinner in the world, man. But yeah, you need to give me your birthright. Give me your birthright." Which was the that lineage would be passed down to make so that's why the uh, Hebrew people maybe are milder or meeker. They would perceive the other races, the Canaanites, as giants. I don't know if that was, I don't know. I would love to follow that lineage. Did that come from the other brother? Uh, uh, I forget their names, but yeah, one was a meek, and one was kind of burly and everything. So yeah, how interesting. And then the big, so he like did he's like, yeah, sure, I'll give you my birthright, whatever. I'm just tired, tired as hell. Just make me food. I'll give me the birthright. And then of course also the brother who had done that had actually gone to Abraham and talked about that, and Abraham was kind of meek. So apparently the birthright being passed through the Hebrew birthright was probably it was manipulated to be from a worker, a physical worker, to a um, someone who spent time at home and not out in the field, and maybe had time to do more thinking and rationalizing, and instead of being of assistance to the worker, actually hustled the birthright of uh, God's favorite, uh, being the line from which God was going to reach out to man, started from manipulation, not by Abraham, but by Abraham's sons. That second generation, it was like manipulation all over the place there. But anyway, uh, you check it out if you want to. But anyway, where we're at, yeah, a little few more minutes. Back to with the Canaanites. I would like to follow that story. These giant people. Can you imagine? They've established this property, and all of a sudden, some Hebrew people show up. Now, first thing they did was they sent in spies. They noticed that there was a society of giant men, and they sent in spies. So what kind of giants were they? Giants. They were giants, and so they sent in spies. The giants wouldn't notice average sized men, or Hebrew sized men. So they're not like giants as we think in terms of giants. They're not so different in size that they would confuse. Otherwise, the whole spy thing would not work, man. Yeah. Anyway, unless they were so small that they could just go undetected. I don't think it's that they were so small that they would go undetected. I think that they were so um, normal in size, the Hebrews, that they could pass as smaller Canaanites or whatever. And they sent in spies. So spiritual, or at this point, religious warfare. Yeah. Uh, Arguably, you can go all the way back to Cain and Abel and think of religious warfare, but holy wars or whatever. But this is definitely, it's like Hebrew people conspiring to take over uh, Canaan, the land of the Canaanites, because it's their promised land or whatever. But when they came to it, Joseph, for whatever reason, I guess he was told to tap on a rock to gain passage, and in his tiredness and his aspiration and whatever, he beat on the rock in his anger, or whatever. And whatever it is, he did not follow instructions, so he was not granted permission into the promised land. That was Moses. He didn't get to that kind of promised land because he did not follow instruction. So, I want to say it's possible in that way for a person to, and I don't know if that means he went to heaven or not, if we're to follow the parable or not. I don't know. Sometimes people take these Old Testament stories and the parable to New Testament, even though Hebrew people don't really do hell as a destination or whatever. But that is Abraham. I mean, I'm sorry, Moses. Is he wandering around for eternity in his, uh, perdition? He wasn't granted passage into the promised land. So I don't know. I don't know what that means. Yeah, this is, old school text, Old Testament, old school. They call it old school and new school. It's what they need to do this. But so anyway, yeah. I'm really not being too serious about this, except for these are the things that base how that start basing. These are the basis of how we start treating each other, even today. These religious texts, various religious texts, and I'm just saying maybe we should look at them, and maybe there can be some example. But maybe it's not all black and white. Maybe it's not all this is what God said and this is how we have to do things. And if we had had some insight to that, we would not be stoning people for having different views. There would not be justification for hate crimes such as gay bashing to death. I have someone that I know 30, 40 years. I knew personally, and he was killed. And the speculation, the widespread belief is that it was a hate crime that was homophobic in nature or whatever. I don't know. But this is, we that's, there are other things. We have black men in the South, especially if they live in rural areas. They don't, there's still some fear to be had in some places like that. There are still people who will kill the wrong type of man who comes into their narrow neck of the woods. By whatever justification they feel is there. So I'm coming at the end of this video. I just want to say some of our modern prejudices are based on Old Testament fear mongering that probably is not justified in the first place, considering Moses broke the sapphire and went up and rewrote with his own hand, chiseled on new, either wrote with smashed up ink or chiseled on tablet. I'm pretty sure they could make ink back then. So yeah, maybe what was originally that was going to be presented is not the exact same wording as what was presented the second time around. And so consider that the next time you consider using religion as a means for hatred, bigotry, fear, justification for mistreatment or unjust treatment of your of the next fellow person that you come across. Yeah. I love you. Peace, love, and good night. Let me just say, I don't want to take away from anyone's faith. That's not my purpose. But I do want to address the way that sometimes people treat each other and base it in, because I hear this. Hey, the Bible says, the Bible also says Moses broke the sapphire tablets and rewrote the 10 Commandments or whatever was on those tablets, so was not written by the hand of God, the finger of God, but by the interpretation of Moses. So what was his motivation? What's the consequences? Okay. Bye. Good night.